Hello, my name's Chanel. Welcome to my bookbinding studio. This is my first Q&A video. I appreciate everyone who submitted their questions via Instagram and YouTube. I hope you don't mind that I paraphrased most of your questions so that I can answer them as much as possible. I was not expecting so many questions, so I'm really glad that so many of you are curious about what I'm doing. Let's get to it. How did you start bookbinding? What inspired you to start Bitter Melon Bindery? This was the most commonly asked question, and I know why, because it's not very accessible as a craft. And I kind of got lucky because in 2013 there was a workshop offered at a local youth art center, and I decided to take it with my best friends and my sister. I didn't completely fall in love with it, but I was so shocked and proud of my ability to make a book and how actually simple it was. After the workshop, I continued bookbinding as a hobby and just tried to learn as much as I could with whatever information I could find online. Thanks to Sea Lemon's video on Coptic stitch bookbinding, I fell in love with that stitch. I started making my own journals with scrap paper, different kinds of cover materials, and then I started looking into pattern papers. I actually tried using gift wrap as a cover paper and quickly learned that it was way too thin and not good for glue at all. So I just experimented with whatever I could find. I discovered this world of handmade papers from Asia, and I was so curious and just wanted to get my hands on everything. When I became more confident in my skill, I began making gifts for friends and family. And then when my shelves were overflowing with books, I decided to try selling. I decided to sign up for as many craft fairs as I could in my beginning years. This was around 2017, and surprisingly, I got into almost every one I signed up for. I learned that for craft fairs, they're looking for a variety of vendors selling different things, and no one else was doing bookbinding. So selling it at craft fairs was the quickest way for me to learn what people would gravitate to, how much they would buy books for, and why people would pay more for handmade books versus a mass-produced journal from an art supply store. It was not until 2021 when I took it seriously and I decided to go full-time with it. At the time, I wasn't even able to support myself financially with it, but I thought that if I could dedicate the time to try, I would be able to figure it out. It was always a fear of mine to go full-time with bookbinding because it's just not a profitable craft. It takes a long time to make. The materials are quite expensive. You need a lot of space. So I was scared, but I am also someone who likes to tackle problems head on. I like to challenge myself. I'm also really stubborn. So I think that all of that helped me get to where I am today. Why bitter melon? For those who don't know, bitter melon is a vegetable that's eaten across Asia. It's used in stir fries and soups, and I've also had bitter melon juice as well. Some of you probably grew up eating it and hating it. I love hearing everyone's childhood bitter melon stories. If you have one, please let me know and leave a comment. Bitter melon tastes just like it sounds, it's just bitter. As a child, when my mom would cook it for us, I hated it and did not understand why anyone would eat it. As I grew older, I returned to it and started to like the taste of it. And I appreciated the vegetable as something that's a part of me, something that's a part of my family and my roots. I also like that it connects me with other people of Asian diaspora. My appreciation for my cultural foods coincided with my return to embracing my own culture and language as well. So that time was very meaningful for me, and I wanted a name that conjures up feelings, experiences, and memories for other people, and that's why I went with bitter melon. What part of the binding process do you like the most? I like that I can turn really basic sheets of paper into a book, and I like that all the steps kind of lead towards the coming together of a book. So this might be a cheat answer, but I like the end result, and I like being able to use the books that I create. As my journals evolve and change, the journals that I am writing in and keeping are also changing too. So I like that I get to both chronicle my thoughts and reflections and my book designs as well. So I have one that I used in the beginning of my small business journey, one in the middle, and then another one I'm using now. So yeah, I like that I have like a small collection. Where do you get your inspiration? I'm a very tactile and visual learner, so I really like interactive, functional art, especially ones that have like texture and it's colorful. When I reflected on this question, it was hard to pinpoint exactly what inspires me in my bookbinding craft. And so I realized that what helps me create is really being in a state of feeling inspired. So I don't really have like book designs or bookbinders that necessarily come to mind. What helps me feel inspired is when I'm like scrolling TikTok and seeing comedians and musicians do their thing, poets and storytellers, people who are unapologetically themselves, illustration and animation, and also fashion and clothing as a form of self-expression. Seeing people be themselves or evolve into their highest self gives me permission to do what I want to do as well. So I try to maintain that attitude as I'm designing books, because sometimes it can be scary, there can be self-doubt when I'm creating something that hasn't been done before or that I haven't seen yet. Besides working with paper, I really like to work with textiles and yarn and soft things. Things that can be worn, that can be utilized. That's why I've been trying to incorporate cloth and yarn and those kind of materials into my most recent book designs. How do you deal with burnout? Burnout is the hardest thing I've ever experienced. It's demoralizing, it's really crushing, and I hope I never go through it again. So before I decided to do bookbinding full time, I was working in nonprofit. I thought that founding and growing my own nonprofit organization was going to be my life. And I really wanted that life because I wanted so much for my community, and I ended up losing myself in it. I experienced physical and emotional burnout as well as compassion fatigue. I realized that I had no understanding of my boundaries and my needs at the time. I ended up crossing my own boundaries over and over and over again, and as a result, abandoning myself over and over again. Thinking about it now, it makes me really sad. After years of overworking myself, in 2020, I finally hit a wall and crashed. My body just couldn't take it anymore, and it was giving me so many signals to leave and to stop the work. In 2021, I feel like I have been in survival mode, and moving to LA, I feel like I'm finally coming out of it. When I was working in nonprofit, at the end of the days, I would feel really tired, but never satisfied. I always thought that there was something more to do, that there was just never enough time and I wasn't doing enough. Now, after a lot of self-reflection, I feel like at the end of the days, I feel tired, but I feel satisfied. And I can stop there and return to my work the next day. I still feel like I'm a workaholic, but I am much more gentle on myself now. For me, when it comes to listening to my body, I pay attention to how tired I feel, if my brain feels foggy or heavy, if my eyebrows, like my eyebrows here, are really tight, or there's like a heaviness in my chest or stomach. I know that I have either overworked or that I need a break. So here's what I'm currently working on to prevent burnout at this moment in time. Pacing my work throughout the day and throughout the week. Taking evenings and weekends off, for the most part. Taking breaks when my body needs it, and this means restful breaks. So doing my best to not scroll on my phone. I find that what helps the most, but is the most boring, is to lie down or sit and stare at the ceiling or stare out the window. Sometimes I'll listen to music without singing. So often the piano music that you hear in my videos is what I listen to calm down. Addressing my physical, emotional, and mental needs. And notice what tasks feel energizing or draining. These are not hard and fast rules I'm putting on myself. These are mainly guidelines, and I am definitely very much a work in progress. What else do you like to do besides bookbinding? I feel like bookbinding satisfies most of my need to be creative. I'm very much a homebody, so I like to make my home really cozy by collecting things and decorating. I also like to explore the city and go out on my own adventures, trying new foods and exploring new neighborhoods. I love exploring nature, particularly when there's a body of water involved. So beaches, lakes, rivers. In terms of being creative, the only other craft that I really only consistently do is knitting. I've been knitting since high school. I was in the knitting club, and I only really feel the urge to knit when it's cold outside. So we've been able to escape winter while being here in LA, but probably when I'm back in Vancouver, I'll start knitting again. What are you enjoying about California? What do you miss about home? I love California because the cities are amazing, there's amazing food, the natural spaces are also incredible. I love that you can be in the desert and then be on the top of a mountain within, a couple hours drive. In 2017, I did a program called Seeding Change, and I spent a summer in the Bay Area and had the most transformative experience. So the Bay Area has a soft spot in my heart, and I definitely felt like I found a political home and a political family there. I spent the summer learning about community organizing and did a lot of self-discovery around how I'd like to best participate in my own community. Now that I'm in LA and quite close to the Bay Area, I'm looking forward to finding new ways of participating and contributing. Vancouver. I think distance definitely helps me see Vancouver in a different way. I was born and raised in Vancouver, and this is the first time living in a new city. And having a little bit of distance from it, it's only been a few months, but even those few months have helped me gain an appreciation for Vancouver, being on the outside and feeling nostalgic for the place. Because Vancouver is where my family is and is where I burnt out, it feels like a place where there's a lot of history, and moving away has definitely helped me process a lot of that. I'm so glad that I get to do that, and the thought of returning home or being there isn't as difficult as it used to be. Do you have advice for starting a bookbinding business? I'm going to give a disclaimer that everything I share is based on my own experience. So in terms of giving business advice, I am not suitable for that at all. Since starting Bitter Melon Bindery in 2017, I think this year is going to be my first year where I'll be able to make a full-time income. I've worked really hard in the last couple of years to figure out how to make a living out of bookbinding, and it's been a real struggle. So if you're interested in starting any kind of handmade business, I will refer you to these YouTube channels that really helped me in my process. A couple tips that I can think of is, first, to find your artistic style and figure out why you want to sell books. Finding your style is going to take practice and lots of experimenting. And for me, I've always known that I wanted to make books that support other people's personal and creative growth. Decide on 1 or 2 book designs that you can test with people you know. I started with a Coptic stitch journal that was my signature, and then I slowly expanded to sketchbooks and Instax albums. And third, stick to one social media platform and do as much as you can on that platform to grow and gain traction. I fully support anyone who wants to start their own handmade business, especially if it's bookbinding. I think the more bookbinders that are out there sharing their work, there's going to be more appreciation for the craft as well. Again, I don't feel like I'm in a place to give business advice, so I highly recommend that you check out the YouTube channels I recommended. Is bookbinding your full-time job? Yes, bookbinding is my full-time job right now. I like to say that I'm full-time in terms of time, but not money. I am still figuring out how to make a full-time income with this. Have you thought of providing bookbinding classes or workshops? I did teach bookbinding workshops in person in the past, and I don't think I'll be doing it anytime soon. I'm open to doing classes somewhere online in the future. How is solopreneur life compared to your previous jobs? I love working by myself and for myself. I love that I get to decide what I do each day. It is quite easy to get lost, so I have to always be clear about where I'm going, which can get exhausting. Because of the pandemic and my burnout, I've developed pretty bad social anxiety. I don't think that I can work with people anytime soon, but I do miss it. I miss being in a team, and I also miss well-structured, purposeful meetings. What are your plans for expanding your business? I would love to launch a Patreon sometime this year. I don't quite know what it's going to look like yet, but if you all have any ideas, let me know. I think somewhere in the far future, it would be awesome to have my own bookbinding studio where I can store a lot of paper and maybe even host workshops and classes. It feels really daunting to be managing a space right now, but I wouldn't mind that opportunity if it comes along in the far future. Why did you start a YouTube channel? I started YouTube because I was getting frustrated about not growing online. Being an online business and depending on algorithms to do marketing is challenging and confusing. When I got out of my deepest phase of burnout, I was slowly getting back on my feet again and had no idea what to do in terms of work. And I knew that I didn't want to find work, and I had this side hustle that I could potentially grow. There had also been many times when bookbinding constantly was really exhausting, and I knew that I didn't want to just be selling books. I wanted to just do something else with the books. So an option that made sense to me was content creation and documenting my process. I was very camera shy before I started, so I wanted to challenge myself and put myself out there. And I thought I could offer something new and unique to what already exists on YouTube. Do you have tips for starting a YouTube channel? I recommend making something and uploading it. I know it sounds scary, but you just gotta try it and see how you feel about it. That way you'll know if making videos is something you actually like doing. When I started YouTube, I knew I wanted to make studio vlogs because that was the content that I most enjoyed watching. And then when I got feedback that my videos felt calming, I decided to go all in that direction and optimize the feeling of calm in my videos. Lucy! Another thing I kept in mind in terms of growing my channel was to make searchable content. Studio vlogs are a very broad category on YouTube, and there's a lot of people making it, so I knew that there would be a smaller number watching my studio vlogs. So that's why I make ASMR, quiet, process videos, and tutorials, because those are the kind of videos that people are looking for. I think of those videos as access points for people to get to know me and my channel. It was very overwhelming in the beginning, but the more videos I uploaded, the more I realized that each video doesn't have to be perfect, and I had another chance to improve the next week. I also watched a lot of beginner YouTuber videos. There's so many resources out there for you to get started. It also really helps that I have a partner who is a videographer and knows how to make good quality videos. He taught me a lot in the beginning, and I was able to take off on my own. Why do you mainly use Coptic stitch and not other methods? To be honest, I wasn't really interested in other methods. I loved the Coptic stitch and wanted it to be my signature style. So I only stuck with Coptic stitch up until last year when I learned case binding. So it was only recently when I decided that I wanted to open up more and expand my skills and try new bookbinding methods. Can you do a run-through of all your tools and materials? I got a lot of very specific and technical questions about tools and materials, and I can't answer all of them here, but I'm going to keep them in mind and try to answer them through the course of my future videos. I recently made a softcover journal tutorial listing some tools and materials that I use for those, and I have a book cloth tutorial video as well, so I'll link those below. Do you have resources for getting into bookbinding? Bookbinding knowledge is quite scattered across the internet. I've returned to C Lemon and DAS bookbinding a lot here on YouTube. You could look for bookbinding workshops or book art centers in your area. If you'd like to read about bookbinding, I will link an Instagram post that I saved in my description below. A fellow bookbinder listed all the books that have helped her on her learning journey. Where can I get bookbinding supplies? Here are some shops based in the US where you can peruse bookbinding tools and materials. You can even just window shop to see what's out there. If you have any resources or books about bookbinding that have helped you, please leave a comment. Let's share information with each other. I really want this place to be supportive to anyone who wants to advance their bookbinding skills. This week marks my 1 year on YouTube, and it blows my mind how far I've come and that I've surpassed 20,000 subscribers. I think with YouTube, my love for bookbinding has only grown because it doesn't just feel like I'm bookbinding alone in my room. I am being witnessed and supported and cheered on by you all, so I'm grateful that you choose to invite me into your day, and it really keeps me going. Thank you for being here, thank you for subscribing, and I'll talk to you soon.